Welcome everyone to AutismBC Talks. I am Sarah. I am Regional Coordinator for Vancouver Island. And today we have Dr. Natalie Engelbrecht from Embrace Autism, and she's going to tell us a bit about Embrace and how they diagnose autism in adults. So this will be a great learning opportunity for you or your loved ones to see how Embrace could possibly help on your journey to a diagnosis. Welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
If you don't mind just starting with telling us a bit about yourself.
I got a diagnosis at just 46 turning 47, so that's about 6 years ago, and was very shocked. I had been working as a trauma therapist for 27 years at that point, and had no concept at all that I was autistic. There was just these things that people would say to me, like, you should go and socialize more, like, or why is there a book that comes into the clinic every day? And I was like, I read it. So, things like that. And my kids had gotten older and hit their teens, and they were being more active with their friends. And suddenly I just sort of holed up in my room and just became very consumed with research, and everybody started wondering what was going on with me. Like, at the same time, I became very increased in depression, but I was acting in a way that the doctor found was peculiar, because I'd be talking about it and laughing. And so they suggested that I get an assessment, but just had no concept of what was going on. And I was writing on a platform just regarding actually masking. I didn't know anything about autism. I wasn't writing about autism at this point, but I was writing about not masking, that in some way that I've been pretending to be somebody that I'm not my entire life, and that everything seemed like a performance, and I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was just done. So I actually met Eva, who's the co-founder of Embrace Autism, and Eva is autistic, and Eva suggested to me that I might be autistic. We started writing together. We're both, completely consumed with different topics and sort of hacks on happiness, and was writing and studying a lot on psychopathy, just trying to figure out just these different kind of neurologies and personality disorders, and what's going on in terms of me. And she suggested I take the AQ, which is the autism quotient, and I scored 39, and I was just like, what? And because 26 is over threshold, and so significantly over threshold. So I took it again, thinking like, I'm going to be even more. I'm gonna be really like I can't think of the word, but it's conservative. I'm gonna be very conservative in my information, and I scored higher. I was like, so then I asked like friends, I'm like, can you just take this? And they were scoring like 11, and I just was like, how'd you get that? So then I started wanting to get every test I could get my hands on, the RADS, and scored very high on that, and scored lower in the empathy quotient than other typical females. And so I decided that I wanted to go and see somebody and have myself assessed, and it turned out that I was autistic, and I was just so happy about it. And because it had just been a lifetime of not understanding myself. Like, the teachers would call my parents in because I was behaving too well, right? And there's the rule-based, and I was just so proud of that. I was like, oh, my parents are being called in because I'm so good, not realizing that, teachers aren't calling parents in because they're thinking this is so great. So, and it began to, I was going back in time and beginning to understand all these things I just didn't understand about myself. And I decided to actually go for a second diagnosis just because I'd been working in the mental health field and had just not even had this on my radar. I just knew there was a group of patients that I seemed to connect with that my assistants didn't. And they would say that that person's really, direct, or it's like rude. And I was like, I love that patient because they just tell me exactly what they need and I'm never confused. So I went for a second independent diagnosis and was diagnosed again. And then it just became a consumption of mine. I dropped writing about anything else. And I was writing on a platform on autism, and I was reading, and everybody was so depressed about it. And I just didn't understand this because I was just so happy. I was, I'd met this person, Eva, like I said, and they're honest and they're kind and they're gentle. And I was like, and they're intelligent. And I'm like, that's what I am. I'm like, this is fantastic, right? Because I just really had struggled with not feeling good about myself my whole life and not feeling like everybody else. And one thing I hear a lot of clients say to me is like you're behind glass. And I always find it very interesting when people begin to discuss things that I myself have felt, where I would feel this feeling like I'm in this glass box and I can't kind of communicate. And these other personalities go out into the world and deal with it. Like, and I just thought, well, this is weird because, I don't know that anybody else is doing this. And one of the things people talk about is, well, everybody masks, like everybody, obviously as you're sitting here, it's not going to be the same as when you're sitting at home. But it's like I said, yeah, but neurotypicals mask in the way that when they go out, they're not putting their feet up on your table. It's like those things. I would go and it would be an entirely new person. So it was like not me at all. So people would, I would be very good at figuring out what people wanted me to be, and become that very quickly. And then people would, can I walk with you? Can I do this with you? And I just, I didn't want to, but also I really realized they were wanting to hang out with this persona that was not me. Mm-hmm. So anyways, we began to write about it. And I actually, one of the things we have is strong ethics. And I felt that somebody had incorrect information and also was being racist on the platform so I made a complaint, but unfortunately, or it's fortunate, but that person was popular. And so I got banned for 2 months. And what ended up happening is that I hadn't realized that the following had gone from like 3,000 people to like 77,000 people following me. And people were hysterical that they couldn't suddenly access, because I was just writing a lot on this, trying to understand, like, who am I? And, very much, I really liked evidence-based information or experience-based. So that somebody who understood it from a personal perspective, or that there was some information to back that up. My kids I used to drive them crazy because we'd be at the dinner table and one of them would say something and I'd be like, is that evidence-based? And I was actually serious. So they eventually got to the point where they'd say something and be like, it's evidence-based, Mom. So, and in retrospect, I realized, maybe that's not what every mom's doing. Is like, is your statement evidence-based, son? So, so then even I just really, it became very much that, I started looking for this information out there, and there's just a complete lack of resources for adults that I found. And so I found information on children, and there's very little information on the difficulties of adults, or just especially like the positive aspects of autism, because, I came in at seeing those things, and so I began to really, it was really a journey of understanding myself, and I just found it motivating to write on a platform like that, that I was going to keep doing that. And so once I got banned, people were really upset. And so Eva just created Embrace Autism and said, why don't you just write here? And so I kept writing there, and people from all over the world started contacting us, and was surprised to find that we have over 5 million people visiting the site monthly from all over the world. I've had the UK police contact me regarding autism and suicidality, like how to help, and literally everywhere, like Asia, Europe, like everywhere. So I get consulted, in terms of different things on autism. And I have always felt that information is really powerful, right? Especially when it can help us make sense of our lives, and that it can help us discover who we are and what our potential is. And so I realized that, like, for myself, I would read an article and I could figure out how the scoring was on that test. And some of the people, like when we contacted some of the researchers that wrote the test, they were like, how did you figure out the scoring? I was like, oh, I just read the paper. And, and they were just, they were shocked. And so I realized this wasn't something that everybody could access, and felt that, it was so life-changing for me, right? It's so many of us with autism struggle with suicidality, and it's just a topic that people really don't talk about. And they say 70%, but I have yet to, I don't know, it's like, I would say it's much higher, like 90, 95%. It's just so consistent. And I bring it up and talk to people because I don't want them to hurt themselves. 50% of us attempt, and 10% of us succeed. And I actually did attempt prior to getting my diagnosis, and I was just really lucky that I knew Eva at the time, and the police were called. So, I see it as a really serious concern, and that research came out. Michelle Garnett was talking about it, she's from Australia, one of the leading people in terms of autism diagnosis for females. They found that the number one factor in improving our lives is a diagnosis. So, it's one of those things when people say, like, what's the benefit of getting a diagnosis? It can save your life. And it certainly did with me. So, in terms of, it allowed me not to kind of, now I don't struggle with the depression in the same way, and I'm much less anxious than I was. And I don't really struggle so much with the suicidality. It's more just kind of like, I take it now as a marker that I think I'm upset, and I better check what that is. So, and I help other autistic people learn to use that as a marker rather than something to act on. So, and I just started having so many people contacting me saying that, what I was writing was saving their lives, and that they were feeling like they weren't abnormal. And so right from the beginning, I began to think about autism in terms of what are the superpowers and what are my kryptonites, and began to look at, what are the things that I was struggling with, because there were these things that just like, making an appointment or socializing. And I would always get this suggestion that you should go and socialize, right? It's like, what's going to make you feel better and less depressed is going out. And I was like, no. And this just kept being insisted. And I just didn't know why that didn't work for me, or, why I just wasn't the same as other girls. It's like, I didn't seem to like the same things as them, and I got along a lot better with guys. And I just found that with guys, it's like I could be direct, whereas with females, there was a lot of undercurrent that I just didn't understand. And it just, like, when you don't know who you are, just feeling like you're failing all the time, right? And then that has a significant effect on your well-being. And so what you do is you start camouflaging more and more. And that's one thing we look at as the CAT-Q, is like, how much are you camouflaging? Because scores above 40, and the individual categories are associated with anxiety and depression, identity crisis, and suicidality. And I think that's one of the things, is the identity crisis, because Tony Attwood actually had a really brilliant understanding of why this is so detrimental that I found very helpful, which was that if you don't know who you are and somebody says you're mean, then you go, am I mean? You know, it's like, yeah, I did this thing when I was 16. And it sounds very rigid, because it is. It's like, oh yeah, I remember this one thing I did that wasn't nice when I was 16, and then that makes me mean. And so you have no defense against like things that bullies are saying, because typically, like with human beings, you're going to come up with an example. And it's strange because you know, the most common career I think the females go into is we become in the helping profession. And we're really good at this. But it didn't seem to translate into my own personal life. And so it's like with human beings, it's like I could systemize them. And so people will be like telling me I'm psychic, and I'm not psychic. But what I could do is the way you breathe, the way you move, I could predict things very easily from that. So I don't know if there's, I mean, did you, like, maybe just did you want me to talk more on the benefits of diagnosis?
Yeah, I guess we can kind of, you touched on it a little bit anyway, but I mean, I've had a lot of people reach out and say like, there aren't really a lot of supports anyway, so how would it benefit me? So you went into that a little bit for mental health.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mental health is a really big piece. Understanding yourself is a really big piece. So, for example, one of the things that more recently has come out about us is empathic attunement, which once I understood this, it made sense to me. Our emotional empathy is typically much higher than a neurotypical's, and our cognitive empathy is much lower. And what that ends up resulting in is behavioral empathy challenges. So while they were like, you guys have got empathy problems, it's like, so empathic attunement is just in the way I don't filter other information, I don't filter somebody else's emotions. So if somebody's upset around me, I can't bear it. It's like it becomes too intense. And then it becomes difficult for me to help them. So I'd be like, you know, it's just been very helpful for friends and family to understand that you can't do that. So it's like, because I'll end up getting so distressed, and it's, you know, I'll say like, I don't just get distressed in that moment. It's like the next 48 hours of my life, I'm upset about that. So it helped me judge myself less harshly, but also friends and family suddenly began to make sense. Like, you know, why, like my ex-husband and I are good friends. And one thing he couldn't understand is why I would stand in the kitchen and not know what to do. Because he just thought it was like, you know, but now he understands. It's like when I say to him, you know, what would you like me to do? He'll just say, do this, this, and this. And, you know, whereas before he would say like, oh, that's just so rude to say. I'm like, but it's like, otherwise I don't know what, it's like, I'm like, I don't find it rude. It's like, you know, it's just, it's overwhelming to stand there and not know what to do. And then you start feeling bad that I'm not helping. And so that's one thing. And so it made a huge difference with, it made a huge difference for my son to understand me. And people, you know, are then able to advocate for themselves, like with their employer or with school. Because I think life is just so distressing and complex and bewildering for the undiagnosed person, you know, and it's like just even been more recently that I've started really advocating for myself, because, and so that's been after 6 years in terms of what do I need. And so I'm taking a course right now, and one of the things is you can meet with the prof once a week. And it's like, okay, that's a problem in itself. You can meet with a prof once a week if you want to. So, you know, I just shared that I was autistic, and they were like, you know what, I'm just going to book a time, same time every week, and we can meet for the course. And I was like, yeah, okay, good. It's like, I don't have to book the appointment. It's there, you know, and, you know, and just also explaining to people in the group actually that I'm very direct, and that you know, so that's one thing. But the other thing that's been really nice is that some of the other participants have realized that they're autistic, and because it's a course on anxiety, and realized that, you know, understood themselves, and then went to Embrace and took some of the tests, and they self-diagnosed and said that they felt like, you know, a weight was lifted off their shoulder. I said, well, just wait a little bit and you'll feel like the world's lifted off your shoulders. So the other thing it can correct is a previous misdiagnosis, because one of the factors, for example, with you know, autistics is the incorrect diagnosis. It's particular for females. Like often we get borderline diagnosis, borderline personality, you know, or schizophrenia or schizoid, or, you know, personality disorder of like unidentified personality disorder, which that drives me crazy, because I'm like, there is no such thing. Like, it's like they're just saying, you've got a personality disorder, but you don't fit all the criteria, you know. It's like, well, that, you know, so you see the females coming in with this whole host of personality, sorry, a whole host of diagnoses that are, you know, some of them are valid, like the general anxiety and the social anxiety and the depression, because by the time they've gotten there as an adult, it's been so detrimental. You know, another thing was that it helped me recognize that my son was on the spectrum. And so, you know, that's been helpful in terms of then being able to advocate for him. So a lot of us either figure it out because our kids are, or we start figuring out our kids are because of the information with ourselves. Does that?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. If someone came to you and wanted to start the process, could you sort of do a brief outline of how it works?
Sure. So I do a three-part process, and part one is a screening, because to me, it just, when I thought about it, it just didn't make logical sense. So most people actually go to the website, will do all the tests that we offer. So they're sort of screening themselves to start off with, which is, I think, great for them. And, you know, they'll take often a long time to contact me. And then part one is a screening, which is I'm looking at, do you have the traits that the DSM is asking for? And then do you, you know, the psychometrics. So what are they predicting? And I know that, you know, like I do a lot of psychometrics because I like to understand myself, and also I just feel more comfortable in terms of the understanding, in terms of, because everything fits together very nicely. Like I was saying, you know, the low EQ, the low like cognitive empathy, the higher emotional empathy, the higher like the autism quotient, etc. So there's a bunch of tests that allow to screen that. Then, you know, I can look at that and think about, well, this person maybe has ADHD instead. So I'll let a person know that if they don't look like their traits are autistic, or I'll say that, you know, this definitely has a potential that you have autism, and if you want to, you can proceed. And then part two is the diagnostic portion of that, and some people do part three. So there is, in part two, again, more psychometrics. And here I'm also looking now for the co-occurrences, like in particular alexithymia, ADHD, OCD, but just different things that are really common. And so autism by itself looks very different than autism with alexithymia. And that's been really kind of disastrous in the research, because I didn't know that. So the autism without the alexithymia, those autistics don't have any problem with facial recognition, emotion recognition, any of that. But if you've got the co-occurring alexithymia, then you are going to have those challenges. So that's been confusing for a lot of people, that like, I don't have all these problems that they talk about with autism. It's like, well, you don't have alexithymia. So, you know, because so that's one of the things. And then also, sorry, okay. autism with ADHD is, again, looks very different. So, you know, here there's even more task initiation, often creative people, often often if you're gifted, you're going to have both of those. And it's usually the inattentive rather than combined. So again, it's just not being picked up. So we're kind of looking at the mad creative professor, and they find that it's associated with higher innovation, autism with the ADHD. So these are, you know, I think of our creative, innovative autistics. And so that's helpful in terms of that. So part 2 also includes me doing an interview with the person. And that's the ADOS in terms of which looks at different things, just like gesturing and facial expression. We often keep our face really still here, like autistics, I find, because we've learned to do the other things, or it'll look at things like how well our perspective taking, etc. So from there. And then there's there's a part 3 that's authored where there's an independent medical review. So the entire file gets sent over, and that's by a medical doctor. And that's because some people, it depends on what you require here, like here, because I'm a registered psychotherapist and a naturopathic doctor, I'm allowed to, if I have certification, I'm allowed to diagnose, but sometimes people need a medical doctor to review and assess as well. That's one of the things in BC. It's like in BC, sometimes with for a child, you've got to go through the Ministry of Children and Family Development, but because there's no funding there for adults, in BC, a confirmation by a psychologist or a psychiatrist of the diagnosis is required if you want to access like funding, etc.
Right. So the diagnosis would be okay for federal benefits, but then for BC benefits, they'd want to get it confirmed here in BC, if I'm getting that right.
Yeah, correct. So it's just, yeah. So in BC, I mean, that's what I found in terms of that. So, and there's a lot of confusion, I think, in terms of people just, because it's different everywhere, like in some places. So this is why I always tell people, like, check with who you want to use this for, what they need. So in BC, I've seen for children, there's just a form that you would then take along with the diagnosis. But I always suggest to people, like, to start off with that. And some people just do the screening, right? Because, and I've had a lot of people do the screening and then take that to their psychiatrist or psychologist, and the person's like, yeah, you're autistic, because there's a lot of information on that. And I've also had where I've done the assessment and then a psychiatrist or psychologist literally takes it and they just copy it. And I do not care. It's like, I'm like, that's fantastic, because I usually write about 34 to 36 pages, whereas like the average report is, well, mine was a page and a half, and Eva got half a page. Some people get a few pages, but it's like, I feel that there's so little known about autism. So each psychometric, I explain what is this, and why is this confirm or not confirm. And it's just, I'm really passionate about autism, and it's like, I feel that it's important that somebody walking away has an understanding of what to do in terms of, so there's recommendations, but also like understands themselves and is able to explain that. And also if they wanted to share it with somebody, that somebody isn't going to go, no, you're not autistic, right? They'll look at that and understand. So that, so I found that's been consistent with people, where they've been able to share that with a family member, and somebody's then finally been able to understand it. So it's written from that perspective, that I assume that people have an incorrect assumption about us. Yeah.
It's actually really great. So thank you
good.
so much. Yeah.
Good. Oh, you're very welcome. It's such a pleasure, and thank you for asking me, because it's so important to me. It's been yeah, like life changing. So